As much as I love basements, and I desperately wanted a basement studio my whole life, now that I have one, I'll never do it again.
Wow, this is such an amazing crowd.
Such a
Thank you all so much for coming out tonight.
I had a humidifier in there, and so I have to carry buckets of
Wow, all
water to
right,
the humidifier.
we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all again so much for coming out. My name is Amali, and I'm the events director for Books Are Magic, which, if you don't know, is a wonderful little indie bookstore just a couple blocks away from here. So we're super excited to be hosting tonight's event. And before I introduce our wonderful authors tonight, I just have a few housekeeping notes to get out of the way. First off, of course, I want to give a huge thank you to Leia Beer Company for letting us use their space tonight. This is the first event that we're hosting here, and we're really, really excited. If you need to use the restroom at any point, they are downstairs to the left of the bar, I believe. And speaking of which, if you haven't grabbed a drink yet, we definitely recommend that you do so. Feel free to visit the bar, come back with your drinks at any point, and please make sure to always tip your bartenders. We will be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of tonight's conversation, so feel free to start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them. I know many of you picked up a book when you purchased your ticket, but in case you didn't, we do have additional copies of the Everlasting Meal Cookbook available for purchase tonight at the table in the back corner over there. Tamar will be around to sign and personalize your books after the conversation as well. And if you're joining us virtually tonight on the live stream, you can purchase a copy by clicking the link in the live stream description. Last thing, these beautiful paintings behind me, all except one, are for sale. And there are also prints for sale. The artist Caitlin is here tonight, so I definitely recommend you take a look. These are gorgeous prints. Definitely will make your home feel very cozy and lovely. All right, that's all the notes out of the way. Tonight it is my privilege to introduce Tamar Adler and Andy Baraghani, who join us to celebrate the launch of Tamar's newest, much anticipated cookbook, the Everlasting Meal Cookbook. So, I'm sure most of you know, but if you didn't, Tamar is the queen of sustainable cooking. This cookbook challenges readers to rethink those leftovers sitting in the back of the fridge and presents unique, accessible recipes to utilize every bit of your pantry. Not to mention, once again, the stunning artwork. Tamar Adler is the James Beard and IACP award-winning author of An Everlasting Meal, Something Old, Something New, and An Everlasting Meal Cookbook. She is a contributing editor at Vogue and the host of the luminary podcast, Food Actually. She lives in Hudson, New York. And as I mentioned earlier, Andy Baraghani joins Tamar in conversation tonight. Andy is a writer and recipe developer here in New York City and recently published his debut New York Times bestselling cookbook, The Cook You Want to Be, also available for purchase tonight. He worked as a writer and test kitchen cook at Silver Magazine and Tasting Table, and most recently was a longtime senior editor at Bon Appetit. All right, that is all from me. Without any further delay, please join me in giving Tamar and Andy a very warm welcome.
Getting liquored up, so I'm gonna pour some water for her. I wasn't nervous beforehand, but now that I see a handful of my ex-bosses here, I'm terrified.
Do you want to point out who your ex-bosses are?
No, I won't. I wanted to start by telling a story that I know that Tamar's aware of, but I feel like I know her memory is very sharp, but I remember specific things, and I just want to tell a crowd that is not familiar with this story. Tamar and I met over 17 years ago. Right, yeah. 17 years ago at Chez Panisse.
How old were you, Andy?
I was 16, or 17?
You were 16.
16. God, see, she was a good memory. And she was on the line on the South Station at Chez Panisse upstairs at the cafe, and I was a teenage intern, and I was working the runner shift. And the responsibility of the runner was to kind of assist the person who was on the South Station, which was a very, very difficult station. There was many, many moving parts, And this was on Valentine's Day. And also, one of the main responsibilities for the mother, correct me if I'm wrong, was to shuck oysters.
True.
And I remember just having this kind of panic and thinking, I've never shucked an oyster before. Luckily, I had Tamar right beside me, and she very generously showed me. She also showed me, which is the part that I don't think you remember, is how to dice a shallot. Because I remember I had to make a little bit of a mignonette, and I took an extra layer of shallot and was clearly removing too much of the outer layer of the shallot. And she's like, no, like this is good. Like don't throw this away. And so it was very much in her from very early on. And I also remember her very vividly kind of showing me like this is an oyster knife and this is the angle that you're gonna hold it. And with this kind of little twist with your wrist, you're gonna flip the upper shelf up and you're just gonna see this beautiful unveiling of this briny oyster. And you have to be quite delicate so you don't puncture it. And that was my really introduction to shuck oysters. And I don't know if she knows this too, but I ended up working 2 summers as an oyster shark when I first went to New York. But the point of this story is that her innate gentleness, calmness, and desire to instruct cooks both as young, older, amateur experts, it's been in her for as long as I've known her. So it feels very fitting that, and I feel very grateful to be speaking with you tonight.
Thank you. You're amazing.
I wanted to start out by asking you kind of the big question, which is, I think a lot of us read your first book, An Everlasting Meal, and I guess you wrote a second book. What made you want to kind of return to this idea? Because in your first book, what I remember is you really empowering the home cook, providing these kind of lessons for them to really learn how to kind of feed themselves. And here, it feels like you expanded on that and gave them everything, all the resources they can have to become better and more thoughtful cooks. So how did you kind of come back to this idea?
I think it was, in part, it was having my son, Louis, and realizing, who's right here, and realizing that there existed moments in life where you didn't have the time or peace of mind to do as much contemplation as I had done when I wrote my first book, and as much as I was asking people to do. And sometimes you just need a recipe. Like sometimes you just, even if you don't actually need it, I wanted people to have that crutch available. Because I experienced what it was to have a child and to have less time than I had ever had before. And I thought, well, if this kind of cooking works, which I know it does, then it should work in the form of a recipe where, I wanted to make something that people could have as like I know I'm supposed to like know what to do with all of this, but I don't in this moment. I want to outsource it. And I wanted people to have like an outsourcing opportunity that was there, and it was like, when I originally pitched the book, I pitched it as like a fat, ugly book. And it's not ugly, it's super beautiful. But I was like, I just wanted this thing that had every single thing you could ever need in it. And it was not at all aspirational, and was just like, this just like proves to me that I can do this every day, that what I have is enough. And then I thought, I'll just write a book that has every recipe that anybody could ever want, which I didn't do, but that was what I wanted to do. And then I originally was like, and it's gonna have every ingredient that exists, obviously, and then it'll have everything. But then that didn't also do exactly that.
There is, this isn't a rumor, it is true that it was it a friend who suggested that it should be called How to Make Everything, ... again.
That was Cal Peterman. I was describing what it was to my friend Cal, who was both of our former bosses, and he said, it's How to Cook Everything, again. Which is a good name. Yeah.
I think about cookbooks and someone who is a recipe developer. So much of recipe development, and especially with cookbooks, you're telling the reader, the home cook, to buy these set of ingredients and to make something with it. And you are doing really what I think is the complete reverse. It's like you don't necessarily go out and buy anything. Like just you can make something beautiful and delicious with what you have. How do you even approach that from like a I'm curious as a recipe developer, from like how much takeout, how much cooking did you have to do to kind of figure out what leftovers you would have?
I was having a really hard time coming up with all of the leftovers in the world, and I realized I didn't know them all, and so I hired a really amazing woman named Amanda who I met through Dan Barber. And she was doing freelance cooking stuff, and I gave her a huge box of cookbooks, which I think she still has actually, and I went back. But it was like I tried to get as many different cuisines in there. I've got a lot of cookbooks, and I gave them to her, and I asked her to make an A to Z list of ingredients. But it had to be something that you would have left over. So she would do like A, and then I would have to explain to her that there's too much of like an actual ingredient, you know? I was like, no, I need something like leftover amaretti cookies. Like think of it, you know, like you have to picture that it's like just a little bit or bob. And so she did A, and then eventually she really got a hang of it, and she made me an A to Z list of things that you could have left over. And then I did kind of the same thing and fed stuff into there. And then I made a calendar, which Pete and Lewis probably remember, where I would just put I did it alphabetically. So I did A for like 3 weeks, which made for crazy cooking. It was really weird.
And a lot of apple pie for me.
So weird. And I also, sometimes I would make like leftover key lime pie. And I would write these these ingredient lists, shopping lists, they're called shopping lists, and give them to my husband, and he would go to the supermarket and be like, key lime pie is not a thing that I could get. I'd be like, look in the freezer section. And he'd get like frozen key lime pie or blintzes. And then when he couldn't find it, I would make it. So I got really good at making samosas. I got reasonably good at making chapati and roti, because I couldn't get them easily right around me. I got like proficient in some things because I had to make the whole food before I could let it sit for a day and have it left over.
I peeked at the index, or I shouldn't say peeked, I spent quite some time looking at the index, and it ranges from Arnold Palmer and sour cherry filling to Fritos, lasagna. I guess what was I guess what was the leftover ingredient that was the most difficult to kind of make something really delicious out of? I mean, the sour milk, that's actually feels so smart. That feels so.
No, there are a lot of things that are easy and that are natural, and like it felt almost like cheating putting them in the book because they're just ingredients in, for most people they're just ingredients. So it was like that was just writing a recipe. Mel and Ryan was kind of hard, not the hard part, the shell, but the rind in between. It was kind of hard. I tried to make cake pops with leftover cake, and I really didn't like them. And I think that might just be my issue, but I went through this whole process, and then I was like, I don't like cake pops. So
there's leftover recipe for cupcakes, right?
Probably.
There's 1,500 recipes in the book, by the way. Which reminds me, 1,500 recipes. The average cookbook has anywhere from like 100 to 120. How did you end up developing 1,500 recipes, and how many were cut, I have to ask?
A lot. But in part, it was because some of the recipe testers are here. So everybody who tested recipes volunteered to do it, and just out of the kindness of their heart. I didn't even pay them for ingredients because nobody knew what I couldn't really. They had to start with like leftover whatever. Somebody in Canada had to find queso dip. I was like, I don't think they have this here. It's delicious, and she was so happy with what she made. She made queso cornbread and queso mac and cheese. She was like, I love queso. So that was great. But I got all of these recipe testers who are all thanked in the book because it was so amazing. I would send them out recipes that were like partially developed, or did you have a gross one? Yeah, you had a gross one. The chicken, the leftover chicken bean stew. Yeah, and like so I got really people were super honest, and the way I was able to do so many and like cut so many was that I had all of these amazing helpers, and if something was gross, they would tell me that it was gross. And I mean, I forget who this was, but somebody actually got kind of angry. And she was like, that was like the grossest thing I've ever had.
That's important. You need honest.
Yeah, she was like, first of all, what is a dumpling really? And I was like, that's a good point. What is a dumpling? But then it was just like, I like ended up wasting all of these ingredients, and I put them in boiling water, and then I had like weird donut soup that you call the dumpling. Like, just stand down, girl. And I was like, okay. So I cut that one.
This one out.
Yeah, and then somebody else wrote me, I wrote in the note, this is mediocre. Like in the recipe note that was sent out. She wrote that, they wrote back to me, and they wrote, because of your note, I was prepared for this to be mediocre. But nothing could have prepared me for just how mediocre it was. And I was my husband Pete convinced me not to do this, but I was like, I'm gonna put them all in, and then just have like a delicious face next to the ones that are good, and then have like a not so delicious face. And both he and my editor said that we shouldn't do that. They said just don't put in the gross ones.
I'm going to ask you to read one of my favorite passages, but it's page 245, second paragraph.
Have people here watched Slow Horses? Yes. Okay, I want to do this for one moment before we get on to this. Do I look like anyone? It's Jackson. 242?
245,
245.
second paragraph.
Also, can I just show the painting in this one?
Gorgeous.
How amazing that is. Yeah, so Kayla Winter, who's right there, painted all of these, we took pictures of them, but we set these all up with like our pots and our stuff, and it's so beautiful. Most of the leftover? Sorry? Okay. Because I love epigraphs, the epigraph of this chapter is really great. It's all things make broth. Most of the leftover soup ideas in this chapter call for broth or water. To decide which you will use, taste whatever broth you have on hand. One might assume that chicken stock tastes like chicken stock, and a liquid reserved from rehydrating dried mushrooms like deep and earthy mushrooms. But some purchased chicken stock tastes like cardboard, and mushroom liquid tastes like dust if the mushrooms were old. And sometimes the liquid that tasted good yesterday spent the night going sour. Taste what you have, and if it tastes bad, you can always use trusty water, whose taste you know and like. If broth is cold and you can't bear a sip, warm a few spoonfuls, then taste it.
There's a calmness and confidence in your writing that I think anybody who reads your writing is aware of very quickly. And I guess as someone who's a cook, who's a writer, who's a creative, I definitely have suffered from my own level of imposter syndrome. I am convinced that you've never had that in your life. I feel like where does this kind of natural confidence, but also I should say optimism. There's this level of optimism that it feels I can't get enough of when I read your writing. Where does that come from? From like as a writing standpoint, but also from the cook's perspective.
That was such a nice thing to say, though, kind of like blushing and sweating, and don't know how to answer that. But cooking-wise, I do think it's true. I think it comes from having messed up a lot and knowing that it's fine. Like in terms of cooking, it's completely genuine. And it's because I have made lots of terrible mistakes, and they're not terrible. It doesn't matter. I've done weird stuff. Like I talked about it recently to Tony when we were talking. Tony took up the straight here. We were talking about cooking the other week.
No
and
one here owns a TV. I work for a TV
The
company.
burnt rice. The burnt rice.
You can get it on YouTube. We did a profile of Tamar. It's called Columbia Broadcasting Systems, maybe? I don't know. CBS.
And they sell TVs at like big box stores.
Yeah, you can get it at Best Buy on Atlantic Avenue.
But we were talking, I ended up talking about all of my biggest cooking errors, and like, you know, I could go on and on. Like I ran a restaurant kitchen and burned all of our short ribs, and we burned rice, and then the cook I asked to make more rice, made the rice into mush, and like realizing that there, you know, the world doesn't end, and there's almost always, people are hungry. You know, there's almost always a way of turning it into something that will be not terrible and probably make somebody feel pretty excited and full.
And delicious.
And delicious. And like that, you know, I just know that that is true, and I think it's also what a great distance there seems to be between my sense that you can always make something edible and probably delicious, and the amount of anxiety I've seen in cooks at home who feel so like paralyzed so much of the time, and I'm like, oh, there's like a cavern, you know, it's like a canyon between my sense that it's always going to be fine, and this fear that like something's always about to go wrong, and it has to be perfect, and what if I overcook it? What if I undercook it? And I'm worried I don't remember to taste it. And so I think it's just my sense that like basically in between here, right, in between being like, yeah, it's always great, and like I can't do anything, is where cooking is, and you know that's amazing. There's such a big range, and it's all fun.
A kind of safe space almost, I feel like that.
It's
In
a safe
between
space.
is like,
Yeah.
where at this, I'm always asking other creatives this, but where do you find like your source of inspiration? I mean, that's something that I think I go through kind of creative slumps. Like, how do you, when you just wrote a book, I like, I imagine you just gave it your all, but how do you continue? How do you evolve in that way?
Well, I tried to write everything that I knew about cooking in this book. So that I was like, if I put it all in one book, then I'll have to come up with something entirely different. So I don't know what else I could. I mean, it'll come to me, but
It'll come to you.
yeah. But then, I mean, with cooking, with this is kind of easy because like every culture in the world does amazing things. They're you know old food. So that was it's like think about wonderful food. And it's all and read cookbooks, but I really felt like with this book I was just kind of collecting and translating and you know making things easier because I'm super lazy. But I don't, you know, where do you get your inspiration?
Well, I think I was going to ask, like, I cook a lot from nostalgia. That doesn't necessarily mean all from like my childhood, but it could be newfound nostalgia. But I find that I get a lot of inspiration from travel. That is a big source of my Iranian upbringing. And so during the pandemic, those few years, a lot of us for cooking, as a recipe developer, that was a really hard time. I had colleagues who were just excel. They were able to develop all the best recipes, and I could not go there. I could not go to that place. It was a really hard place for me because so much of that inspiration I need to taste and interact, and I crave that. But that's just how I'm wired as a cook and creative.
I know, I think I am too. I think travel that's kind of right. It's like tasting something and getting excited. Unless you're writing leftovers book, in which case you got it.
It's like Uber Eats. No Uber Eats. Hey, how are you good for time?
Oh yeah, we're good.
If there were certain leftovers were there any leftovers that you purposely avoided? And I don't want to get into the controversial.
No, I didn't intentionally avoid anything. There were some things that I bought, and then like I tried to buy a lot of like snack foods and ultra processed foods because I wanted the book to be comprehensive, and then I would like try to do stuff with them, and then suddenly I learned, first of all, a lot of ultra processed foods don't really go bad. So like I would try to get like ring dings and like stuff, you know, which are great, but they like kind of stay the way they are for a really long time. No, it's not. But I was like, I'm not needed here. So I did try, I tried to do more of that, and then it was like, this isn't a real problem. And then there are also things that, like, if something tasted gross, like if I purchased something and it was just gross, like really bad, like sickly sweet, some kind of dressing that didn't really, if it tasted gross, I would like sometimes try to do something and then come up against the fact that if something's gross, it just stays gross.
It just stays gross.
Yeah, so I would try and then be like, this is never gonna, no, it couldn't come back from that. So sometimes I would, buy things at the store being like, I'm gonna do a little bit left of this, and it would just be like, it's still bad. Like 1 tablespoon of it is just as bad as the whole bottle.
What made you, this is something that, I love about the book, is that there's no food photography in the book. That was a very conscious decision in an era that I feel like a lot of publishers push for each recipe to have a photo. What made you kind of go for that?
Well, first of all, I never want people to feel like their food is supposed to look a certain way. And I say that, with food media who make beautiful, beautiful pictures, and I love them, and their books so gorgeous, and they're appetizing, and they make me hungry, and they make me want to cook. And I just felt like the role that I could play would be just not that. Just having people feel like this isn't supposed to be anyway. And the whole book, it doesn't start with, recipes that you want to make, it starts with what you have. And so then saying, but it's supposed to be this, I was trying to stay away from aspiration. And I also am friends with an amazing painter who is like, I've, been friends with for years, and we had talked about this. And it seemed like we could maybe do something really beautiful. And the idea of like making very classical paintings in oil that would like dignify this, that was sort of what I hoped to be the magic trick of the book, was like making this really stately thing with these gorgeous textured paintings that were just about stuff that would normally get thrown away, and how dignifying that would be, like with the cook and the ingredient. So some of it came from that conversation and talking about what it would be like with Kate whenever illustrated the book. And yeah.
It makes sense, like, not to have this idea. The trick's also, I imagine everybody's kind of, whether there's a photo or not, everybody's dish is going to look a little different, and that's an okay thing. And I think in this era, it's expected to, like, your recipe should turn out this way, should look this way. It's aspirational.
I once asked my editor at Scrivener if I could change the title to Beautiful Brown Food.
I'm waiting for that book.
I wrote that book. And then she was like, I don't think so. I don't think we're gonna do that. But thank you for that idea. But that's the other reason. It's like, it's not, yes, you can always put, and you should, put beautiful sprinkling of whatever herb you have in your diet, that like spruces things up. But it's brown.
If you had to pick some of were there any things going through while writing this book and testing the recipes, were there any recipes or new lessons that you learned that you know prior to writing this book?
Well, I got really a lot better at baking, and like
At baking?
At baking, yeah. And the lesson I learned there was, I feel like people like to say this thing about baking, that like, yeah, cooking is intuitive, but baking is science, and it matters so much. And part of it was coming out of the pandemic, and I baked a lot during, quarantine. But I don't think that that's true with baking. I think there's a lot. I'm sure if you want a certain thing, and it has to be exactly right. But
It's more forgiving.
Yeah, it's much more forgiving than that. And I learned that like it's not. I understand there's science behind all cooking, but you don't have to like necessarily think about it. You can kind of know what a batter should be like, and like you can vary things up and down, and it's fine. And I kind of stopped measuring for the bunch of my baking. It's fine. I was like, oh, this is not true. This is a myth. It's not so hard.
I agree. I think there's this weird idea with baking for some reason where it's like, oh, you're either one or the other. You either know how to cook savory or you can do sweet.
In my first book, I was terrified of baking. I had like almost nothing in it. And in this one, there are a lot of baked things because I realized that I'm just not scared of.
I should say I feel that way now, but the shortest chapter in my book is the dessert chapter. So, and I say that very quickly in that book. But is there a recipe that I guess this is a tricky question if it's a leftover recipe? But is there, if you were to tell home cooks like this is the recipe you should start with, if you happen to have this leftover, what would it be?
Like a great leftover?
Yeah, like a great leftover.
Beans. Stale bread and beans. But then there are also, I also put like some of my favorite recipes for which you need actual ingredients in the book. And some of them are great. Like there's a torta di riso, which I also put in my second book, but nobody read that book, so I put it again in this book. Because it's so good. You cook risotto rice in milk, and it's super delicious. And then you spread it out into a pan and you dollop ricotta all over it, or you bake it, and it takes like 2 seconds. It's so good. And I just want people to make it, so.
But your milk can't be sour for that.
I don't think so. I mean, you can try. Maybe it's great.
I'm gonna try that. I have some questionable oat milk.
I can't say anything. I don't know how
If there is should we play the garbage game? Or the leftovers game?
I love the garbage game. Yeah, so I did this last night at an event, and it was really great. But tonight, I think you and I will both.
I can go lead, and then we'll go back and forth.
So the idea is everybody takes like 30 seconds and think of things that you sometimes encounter in your pantry or in your crisper drawer or wherever in your kitchen that you don't know what to do with, and then tell us what that thing is, and we will try to solve your leftovers dilemma on the spot. But we'll tell you, if the thing is too gross and you have to throw it out, we'll tell you. So, let's your 30 seconds starts now.
It's all very responsible cooks.
You have 10 seconds left. My only talent is that I'm actually really good at estimating time. Like really good. So I can tell you that your time is up. All right. Hit us. Who's going first? Hadley. Nice one. Raw or cooked? Raw baby carrots, I would say to treat them like regular carrots. Get out of your mind that they were ever baby carrots. And then picture them as a carrot, which might be weirdly and sort of like paradoxically best done by cutting them up. Make them smaller, and you'll never know that they were babies. Amy. Half a what? Andy's gonna take that. I'm drinking wine, so I can't answer.
Raise it. Yeah, you can raise it. Yeah, you can raise it. Which half you said?
Yeah, which half? I would raise it. Wait, why did you use it for a stir fry? Why couldn't you just slice it?
Why not a stir fry? Kimchi. Look, we have.
John Adler, get up here. Everybody, this is my brother, John Adler. Every director of Blue Apron, and you can cook it. Okay, more. Adam. That's a softball.
Yeah, it's easy. I have an idea.
I've got. That means you don't know what to do. No,
I think there's also there's literally an index that says like.
I haven't read the book.
I know, no, it's okay. Adam hasn't read the book yet.
A dressed salad. I feel like I would just cook it down. I just want to cook it down in oil and just have like cooked greens and then put it on toast, like some garlicky toast, and just sort of like kind of vinegar greens.
I made, so one thing is you can make like a gazpacho style soup out of it, and it's super delicious. I have a recipe for it in here, but you just picture how you make gazpacho, which is like a little stale bread, vinegar, fat, and then the puree it, and it's like a green gazpacho, super delicious, with some garlic. And then another one, weirdly, I made this for a dinner party last summer, and everybody was like, "This is the best salad dressing I've ever had," and it was salad dressing. Curated. This is like a mother and child reunion.
Yes.
Scrambled eggs.
Oh, another. No, I love so.
I know you do.
I love it.
It's so gross.
I know, but you have to. That's
Broth.
Well, no, so one. No. One thing you can actually do, which is super delicious, is you pound some garlic, like pound a clove of garlic, and then pound in some scrambled eggs and add oil, and you end up with like a really delicious dolloping sauce, almost like a berbiche. It's very berbiche. And it's super good. You can like salad berbiche.
Berbiche.
Yeah. So that's a really good one. You can also egg salad-ify it. And you can not worry about heating it up, but make like an egg sandwich. So like toast bread, whatever. So have the hot bread, hot cheese, room temperature. The other thing is I would do room temperature, not freezing cold. Freezing cold is kind of gross.
Sushi dinner. Or sushi ginger.
Put it on a rice bowl. You're like, duh. Put it on your rice. Or you can slice it up and add it to the stir fry that Amy Girl was on. Not a cake pop. You had an idea? Lewis wants to eat it. You could crush it. Yeah, you could actually can turn it into like take off the frosting, give it to my son, and then the cake part you can crumble up into crumbs and actually use them like to make a muffin or crumble a crumb or something. I think there's a cake crumb muffin recipe. Did you make it? Oh. And did you freeze them?
What kind of cookies? Well, the oatmeal raisin. Eat the cookie, but eat the cookie, soak it in milk, but also just like take the oatmeal raisin. I almost want to break it down into like a crumb, toast a little bit more, so it's like kind of like a little burnt, and then use it as like a sweet topping to your granola in the morning.
There's also a really delicious old cookie like pudding in here, where you make sort of like whipped cream. I think I put lemon zest in, so it's like a slightly citrusy, Italian tasting whipped cream, and then you put a layer of crumbled cookies in the middle of it, and then you put it in the freezer, and then it's like a little sformato. Cookies, is that a sformato? Whatever.
Also,
Oranges, taking one zest out, like a cocktail, and then that.
Great. Which was the problem that then they're hard to peel. Yeah, I mean you could juice it, zest the rest of it, for sure, and then use the inside for a vinaigrette or a bit of orange juice. I mean zest it and juice it.
you removed one peel. Let's look at orange.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But it gets really hard.
It does roll.
Yeah. I would use it for a vinaigrette. Because you're not going to get enough juice for it to feel like juice.
I messed up with the eggs, but
After the eggs, you got a lot better. Sarah. Oh.
deli hem.
John, you really want to answer that. You really want to answer that. Right, no, yeah. I mean, I like, we often, if we're like, when Ham gets that like funny look, yeah, the sheen. I usually fry it. We'll like heat up a pan, really hot, fry off that sheen, and then put it in a breakfast sandwich. Or make a croquette or two.
I agree with frying it and like put it in a food processor almost, like just really get it fine, brown it, remove it. If you have like some old carrots or some wonky celery and onion, food processor, cook that down, add the ham in, some leftover wine, leftover milk, do a tomato paste.
Ham bolognese.
Yeah, ham bolognese. Carol, I feel like you would like that one. Come on.
Oh yeah. Do you make that all the time?
I would.
7 cups of made.
I feel like I would do. Yeah, I would do curd. I would just do a big batch of some kind of curd.
Wait, what would you do with leftover really old ham and 7 egg yolks together? Yeah. But yeah, it sounds like gross. Or like, ooh, imagine frying 7 egg yolks. Yeah. Yeah, that ham sounds better than the ham that Sarah was talking about.
We're approaching the last
Okay.
10 or so minutes.
So we can open up for any audience questions.
And also, Caitlin is available to answer questions about the art, and she's sitting right there, looking uncomfortable in the second row. But
She will answer questions.
will answer questions, and afterwards, we'll happily talk about art and even sell you the original paintings or the amazing prints. Wow. Yeah, exactly.
One continuous meal.
Yeah, I don't think I'm there yet, but I'll let you know. I'll text you when it happens. Louis, you have a question? That's an amazing question. Louis asked how we chose the picture for the front, which is such a good question. Actually, Caitlin painted, we had to do a special kind of composition, and Caitlin painted a special picture just for the cover that would have enough room to put a title on it. So I think there was another painting, but it couldn't fit all the stuff on it. So then Caitlin painted something that could fit everything. It was really beautiful.
I've been thinking a lot about how much food I throw away recently, and I'm curious about like what your process is. Like, say on a Sunday or something, taking out all the stuff that you're realizing is starting to get bad, looking at it. Like, do you have like I know there's it depends on what you have, but there's like a great.
That's a really good question. I mean, one is you could not think of it as starting to go bad. You could think of it as like something that you cooked one way and it needs to go bad. And I have started labeling things because my family didn't like having to guess what was inside containers. And I have found that labeling stuff also is like, I use brightly colored tape. And I'm all right, like, broccoli. And then I can see it and I think of broccoli. But I think I don't do it all in one day, but I do try, I try to like look at it. If there's something there before I think of something else I want to make, I do go, okay, we have beans, and think of it as like not beans that are going to go bad, but just be like, there are beans, there's beans, and there's broccoli, and approach it at least with that neutrality. That's my process.
I do think that one big thing one of the many big lessons I learned from restaurants is what you said, which is just labeling and dating. It just makes me more responsible. I think it's made it a little bit trickier now that I have a partner of a few years who does not label, who is a little wasteful, and I'm trying to bring him into this side. But I do think like labeling and dating just like holds you accountable. he did something last week, I just say this, that shocked me, and I think I spent half a day talking about it, because he wanted to make me a frittata, and he just used the asparagus tips. And I'm very calm there, I didn't raise my voice. But I gave him the look that my mother gave me when I was younger. And I was like, why would you just, because the tops are the best part. And I was like, what happened to you? So I incorporated it in the evening meal that I made for him. But it's you have to also kind of hold yourself accountable and make your program accountable. I feel. I'm sure there's less waste.
Yeah, just yell, stop doing that. I would taste it. Like you know. If you take a bite of that and it's not good to eat, your body will be like, no way, no day. But like if you take a little bite of it, and you can also see, like if it's, you know the pieces that are like, they're like yellow in the middle and purple around it, tear those off. You know, just 'cause, like that doesn't feel like you're supposed to eat that. But like I would say you can trust yourself. We have like been evolving so that we can do this for a long time.
I agree. I think a lot of it is just like it becomes more intuitive, and I think we think of like a piece of kale. If there's like an area that is yellow, we have to throw the whole thing away, and it's so unnecessary. And for some reason, a lot of us have just become more wasteful because of that kind of mindset. But we kind of have to unlearn that behavior.
So I made a really good jam the other weekend.
That looks so good with hot honey, right?
Delicious, yeah, it's some hot honey. And your kids eat some of the berries, but not all the berries, and they go to the sour in the fridge. And I picked out the squishy ones that I'm not yet totally moving over. And it's delicious, and it's almost gone, but it's still in my fridge 2 weeks later. When do I know that it's not good any longer, and that it might make me sick? I mean, just taste it. It still tastes good.
First of all, it's gonna get that like big level layer of mold on it. It's bad. If it doesn't have that, it's fine. The other thing that sometimes can happen with jam when it goes bad, but it doesn't want to mold, is it will totally separate. Like, and you'll get like all super thin, clear liquid, and then like just chunks of fruit where everything used to be like bonded, congealed. And like when that happens, you're like, not anymore. But it'll get that mold. And yeah, it's still fine. I know when you made that.
Can I also say thank you for transforming my husband into an everyday chef? I eat really well. Almost every night. Oh, yes, thank you.
I don't think I'm fully transformed, because I have a question picking up on your question, which is when you're not cooking for work, and when you're not cooking for the recipes you're developing, do you have like a set grocery list you're picking up every Sunday? Do you have like a set delivery, or are you going to the grocery store and just completely winging it based on whatever you do?
I think it's listening about what you're craving and what you're wanting. I think like the way I eat now is very different than when I was eating 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so I really kind of listen to, I feel like I'm much more in touch with my body and my cravings than I ever have been. So there are certain things that I always keep. I know that there's certain pantry staples that are non-perishable that I just buy a big amount every few months, and ones that I buy every Sunday, and because that they're my go-tos. And you kind of have to kind of continue to cook and taste and realize what are your go-to things. I find that like I naturally need a lot more kind of oniony things, a ton of herbs, lots of lemons, fresh chilies, dried chilies, too much olive oil, and plenty of full-fat yogurt. Like those are definitely the things that I go to. But that might be different for you. But I think cooking more and more allows you to have a better understanding of what you
Do you prep in batches or just like
I am definitely not I do not do big batch cooking. I feel like I'm like that little crazy restaurant side of me is still there, where I'm like, I like cooking start to finish every night. But that just, I'm cooking for one other person every day.
3 times a day, morning and evening.
That asparagus frittata was the third dish he's made me in almost 4 years.
That's what we do. We do everything not mixed together, so everybody can choose. And it's not super hard to do, but palates develop over time and tastes change. We still cook the same thing, but it's all in pieces.
I think we have time for one more.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yes.
Why do you think leftovers and meals made from leftovers often taste better than the things that we started with, the meals that preceded it?
Because it actually takes time for flavor to develop. And you put all of this stuff into it, right? Like you put in all the olive oil, all the whatever. And I think first of all, when you're using something that you've already cooked, you have the benefit of having already put all the time and all those ingredients in it. But I also think that things need time to settle, which is maybe overly spiritual, but I think it's true.
I agree. Flavors have melded over time. A braise, a stew, a soup, they always taste better the next day. But also something even as simple as rice. Fried rice is never good if you make a batch of rice and try to make some fried rice. It's always going to be better because it's kind of dried up and kind of developed this kind of almost outer shell, and it's going to get nice and crunchy. Fried it. Is that our last question?
I think we've got that.
Let's give it up.
Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. Thank you, Andy, for moderating this fantastic discussion. Thank you to everyone who asked fantastic questions. And thank you, of course, to Tamar for celebrating this incredible launch with us. So, as I said earlier, Tamar will be around to sign and personalize your books. We're going to bring a table right up to the front, so just hold tight, and we'll start forming a loopy little line around. We, of course, have plenty of additional copies of the Everlasting Meal Cookbook, An Everlasting Meal, and Andy's cookbook, The Cook You Want to Be. I'm sure if you ask nicely, he'll sign your book too. If you're still with us on the live stream, you can buy all those books by clicking the link in the live stream description. All right, that's all. Let's give these two one last round of applause.